Hello and welcome to the next episode of When Tomorrow Comes. It's Archaeology Week this week, and it's all about the excitement of what's hidden right beneath our feet and fundamentally why it's hidden down there. To help us bash around this question, we've managed to pull both Guy and Florence of LP Archaeology away from their excavation work to join us. So welcome both and thank you for taking part. And we're also joined by our very own archaeology experts, Rob and Steve. Hi to you both as well.
Hello.
How are you all?
So, Rob, you wrote the ICNE article this week. In normal fashion, do you want to give a summary of what your article was all about?
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. I wanted to give, an informative and hopefully interesting brief piece on why archaeology ends up underground. Quite simply, it's a question that we're often asked, and the answer's fairly simple, but not necessarily something that everyone would really know. So hopefully, I, in 500 words, helped answer that question, and got people thinking about what's beneath their feet and how we got there.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I guess I can quite shamefully say I don't know much about the detail of archaeology. And as a planner, my experience is very much checking for archaeological priority areas in a designation map. And then I very much hand over to you guys. So I guess a very basic starting question is, what is archaeology? And frankly, why should we all care? I don't know if Rob or Guy, you want to start off with that and bounce it between yourselves.
It's a very big undergrad essay question. What is archaeology, or what is archaeology about? And I'm sadly a bit too far away from undergraduate to remember what the correct answer is. But Rob, I would say in a nutshell, what I would say is it's the study of all things related to human beings in the past. That's a very short answer to that question. I wouldn't make the word limit on an undergrad essay with that.
Yeah, it's the study of humans via material remains, essentially.
Not dinosaurs is also another one that we get asked about very, very often. Are you looking for dinosaur bones? No, we say no.
No, we don't do dinosaurs. We don't do that. I think it's a cliche, but it's a true one in that archaeology is rubbish. It's past rubbish. The key really is to try and determine how significant that rubbish is. A landfill site that was backfilled yesterday, technically it's archaeology, but it's not very significant. Whereas, the remains and debris left behind by the Romans in London or, in an Iron Age settlement, that is significant.
I guess how do you decide, as you sort of said, the difference between me leaving some rubbish in my cellar and also some rubble underneath a new development? At what point does that become of archaeological interest? What point do you decide that is important?
I think a lot of it actually is in relation to material culture, and assessing material and looking at the value it has in relation to giving us an insight into how people lived previously. I think it's really key kind of taking that material and asking questions in terms of what we can learn as archaeologists and what we can actually disseminate from that information to a wider audience to kind of give a bit more of a well-rounded understanding.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps expand our knowledge about a certain historical period or prehistoric period where that knowledge was previously lacking, then it's significant. Whereas yesterday's landfill, that's not really going to tell us much.
Yeah, so there are some technical ways of considering significance, aren't there? If we want to go into the more kind of, I guess, less archaeological answer and more of the planning related answer, and the ways that we can assess significance to do with the value of sites, either for the kind of academic or research potential that they hold, or whether we want to look at sites in terms of their rarity or their value as part of the group. And in that sense, there's a crossover with conservation, with the building conservation criteria. And I would say that obviously my specialism is more on the side for excavation. So I think that's probably more the kind of ICNE area, really, to look at those things. There are In fact, Flo, you could probably recite the criteria better than I can on the manual of roads and bridges and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say, from a client perspective, that, obviously, when you come across people who've been asked to do a desk-based assessment, often people sort of approach it with a sense of sort of intrepidation and kind of fear about what possibilities of things might be found. And as Rob and Stephen said, a lot of what we find is rubbish, and as long as it's recorded correctly, as long as it's sort of dealt with in line with its significance, that's it's not a big archaeological project. So a lot of the archaeological work that we do is smaller projects, sort of watching briefs that perhaps only roll for perhaps a week, or small evaluation which might actually only produce minor fines or even no fines. So a lot of the time we are just doing that sort of bread and butter work of the archaeological trade, which is going out and assessing whether or not a site that maybe has potential for archaeology has that. It's quite rare, really, that we will come across a site that has really significant archaeology on without us sort of having a bit of a clue beforehand, or perhaps the client not having a bit of a clue beforehand. It's very rare that a client will be totally surprised.
I guess for planners like myself, we, as I say, look at designations, we highlight it to clients, but from your perspective, at what point in the planning process should we really be looking at archaeology and getting the likes of yourselves involved? Do you find that we actually leave it a little bit late at times?
Sometimes it is, yeah, I've got to be honest. The key is to get in there as early as possible.
I mean, you can look at sites at the point of purchase. I mean, you can look at sites where there's not even an active planning requirement, can't you, Robin? You
can, yeah. I mean, the requirements, they do vary slightly depending on the LPA, but generally it's the same sort of stages that you go through. As Flo touched on, there's the desk-based assessment. Then if necessary, there'll be a field evaluation to actually see for real what is there on the site. And then if necessary, there'll be a course of mitigation, which would be potentially an excavation on the site. But to allow enough time and to minimise disruption, it is key to get in there as early as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true what Flo was saying. It's something that which we kind of try and encourage clients to consider, which is that it's to their advantage to assess the risk as early as they possibly can, and then when a project's been done properly, we'll be working through a series of program deadlines, and we'll be hitting all of those absolutely perfectly, and you can see when a project has gone wrong when there's a surprise discovery at the last. That essentially emergency remedial work is essentially means that someone's slipped up at some point earlier on in the process. There's always a risk that things can be unexpected, but obviously from our perspective, if we've all done our jobs absolutely perfectly, then we'll hit our cues all the way along, if you see what I mean.
No, completely, and that's really helpful, and I think it's the message that we always try and get across for archaeology and from our archaeology team, is always be thinking about it. Don't let it hit you later down the line and cause delays. Guess next question you can probably see coming, and speaking to Rob, there's been some interesting queries about it before, but for each one of you, what's the most exciting thing that you have come across in your profession? And I'm not asking for dinosaurs or gold, which is what Rob highlighted earlier, but it can be either an exciting site or something very specific. Florence, I don't know if you want to go first on that one.
Yeah, sure, of course. And I've worked on several sort of in incredible sites. One of the sort of early ones of my career was a large urban excavation, which was right by Tower Hill, which was a city. It was a site that was located over the city ditch that was next to the Roman and sort of medieval wall that surrounded the square mile, throughout those periods, but then eventually got torn down. So we had all sorts of beautifully preserved artifacts that had essentially, to use Rob's phrase, where this ditch was, it had been used as a rubbish dump. So we had, you know, the remains of sort of beautiful sort of glass there, beautiful sort of preserved pieces of pottery, leather as well. But personally, a personal find that I found is that a couple of years ago we were working at Hampton Court Palace, and we found the remains of the manor house that was there before that got torn down in place of Hampton Court, basically. So where we were excavating, we found the kitchens, the sort of 15th century kitchens, a whole beautiful kind of oven range, and sort of tiled black and yellow floor, glazed tiles, which was incredible. And I'm local to that area anyway, so that's had a special significance for me. So yeah, that's me.
So Guy, I'm going to throw it back at you.
So I have two answers to this question. One of them is the comedy answer, and one of them is the treasure answer. I can do both,
Guy.
Yeah, we'll have both, please.
Okay, so the treasure answer is we found an amazing Roman cremation in the Eastern Cemetery, which contained the incredible collection of glass. And this came up on my timeline, my social media recently, because Joe Flatman tweeted the article again. It was published in CBA Journal, you know, years ago, and it popped up in my timeline. I was like, right, that was it. I was there that day when we found that thing. Beautiful mosaic glass bowl. It's the sort of thing which is actually on display in the museum. It's good to have a treasure answer. And the comedy answer is that I found the oldest dated marijuana seed in North Africa.
Well, I bet there's a story behind that one.
That's always that one's always quite a good. That's always quite a good kind of conversation opener with you know, plant drivers or builders or whatever.
That's a good dinner party talk, that is, right there, over a couple of pints. You'll have to tell us sometime. Yeah. Conscious of time, so Rob and Steve, do you want to give your thoughts on that quickly?
I guess if we're going to talk about one object, it would be a Bronze Age sword mould, which was a piece of fired clay where the bronze was poured into to make, as the name suggests, a sword in the Bronze Age. They're very rare. Very, very fragile, and it was a beautiful piece. So that was pretty special. Flo mentioned Hampton Court, which I forgot that I actually worked there also myself a few years back. Mm-hmm. And we found the remains of the Masonic workshops used to construct the palace. And that was completely unexpected. That was in base court. That was cool. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I've heard about the base court excavations from our work there, so that's a really cool site to have done.
And what also sticks in mind is at Bart's Hospital, I uncovered the remains of a house that was burnt down during the Great Fire of London and had collapsed in on itself and was just left. So we unpicked all the debris. We found, you know, burnt remains of the floor, and you could see where all the flames had licked up the walls. There were scorch marks on the brickwork.
Wow,
lots
amazing.
Of melted coins and, you know, burnt troughs, evidence of everyday
activity. Did you get that
activity.
kind of smell? Could you smell the ash kind of thing?
You could, yeah. It's quite surreal, but yeah, very special.
I think also just to mention, we've spoke a lot there in relation to objects, and often as archaeologists we do get asked that question in terms of what's the most interesting thing you found, and often as well it's important to kind of put into context, you know, that we're often looking at the bigger picture. I often say to people, as opposed to objects, I kind of talk about, like, I've had the privilege to work on like early medieval lakeland settlements. I've worked on Roman roadside settlements. Worked on some absolutely fantastic deep urban stratigraphy in the city, which is becoming rarer as time goes on. And it's important as well, like, not to just stress about the objects, but like the opportunity we have to get a kind of a much broader picture about how people lived in the past by looking at the site as a whole.
No, that's really interesting.
That's a great answer. I really like your answer on that, Steve. I actually think that's the answer we kind of all should have given them away.
That we all fail to give.
The thing that we really like, you know, is the stratigraphy, isn't it? It is the site, you know. So when quite often we're asked this question, and so we all have a ready answer trotted out, which is the kind of easy answer that is good and will generally impress people. But actually, what really counts is the, hey, you know, that site that I worked on, or that block of pits that I dug, or, you know, those things is really, that really is the sort of truth answer for amongst archaeologists, as it were.
It's a little bit harder to explain though, so when you're answered by machine drivers, so.
So I just revert back to, yes, it was a gold coin, so yeah.
Oh, guys. No, that's been really good. It's actually been really interesting. And I still find it absolutely fascinating. And I think we all still get excited, like no matter what our background is, about what you can actually find under the floor. I think we all get excited about what we can find in our gardens and things. So there's passion there. I think it's just spreading that knowledge to the likes of people like myself, which is good. I'm going to wrap us up because I'm conscious of time. So I just want to say thank you to you all, particularly Guy and Florence, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, no problem.
And then thanks to everyone who's viewed as well. And I hope that everyone will join us again next week. Thanks all.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.